Good evening from Boston College. I am Jim Keenan, Canisius Professor, Director of the Jesuit Institute, Co-Director of the Gabelli Presidential Scholars Program, and Vice Provost of Global Engagement at Boston College. I welcome you to the show at 6, BC and the Common Good. The show at 6 features friends and members of the BC community discussing a range of issues affecting our world today, all revolving around the theme of the common good. Topics include how the BC community is responding to the effects of COVID-19, to the enduring challenges of the marginalized, to our own resiliency and solidarity, and to the upbuilding of human dignity throughout the world. The show is based on the central insight of the common good. That is, that the resources that humanity has and needs must be shared equitably. For instance, today, each of us is called to promote the common good by social distancing, by wearing masks, by washing our hands. These practices are not only for our own good, but for the common good, for the welfare of all, for the health of all, in particular those most at risk. Let me now introduce my co-host, Tiffany Brooks. Tiffany is a rising senior at Boston College. She loves to be involved. She was the first Black vice president of the undergraduate government of Boston College, is a sacristan for the 1015 Mass, did service through BC Bigs, currently is a member of the student admissions program, and is very involved with theater. Growing up, Tiff has always loved performing and is so glad she was able to continue to do so as a member of the Boston College theater department. She holds a psychology BS major and a double minor in theater and marketing. Welcome, Tiff.
Thank you for having me.
Now our guest, Chris O'Donnell. Chris O'Donnell was a student at the Carroll School of Management when he appeared in his first film, Men Don't Leave. That critically acclaimed performance launched an acting career that spans more than 25 years, including a star-making turn opposite Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, a Broadway run as the lead in Arthur Miller's The Man Who Had All the Luck, and for the past 11 seasons, a starring role as G. Callan in the CBS series NCIS Los Angeles. Chris is an active alum and BC parent, participating in university activities such as the 2013 Sesquicentennial Concert at Boston Symphony Hall, the 2010 Chambers Lecture Series, and the Agape Latte 10th season kickoff in 2016. Chris received an honorary degree from BC in 2017 and served as the 2017 Pops on the Heights Medal Ceremony Chair. Chris and his wife, Carolyn, live in Pacific Palisades with their children. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Finally, an announcement. At 6:40, Tiff and I will begin to ask Chris questions from the audience. Members of the audience can pose questions before 6:40 this evening via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Again, members of the audience can pose questions before 6:40 via the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. They should identify themselves by their name and their relationship to Boston College. So let me start now our interview with my own first question. A wonderful Jesuit from the 20th century was John Lafarge, who was very active in the civil rights movement and editor of the Jesuit weekly America Magazine. He authored an autobiography called The Manner is Ordinary, And it was the title of that book that resonated in me when I think of you. When I first saw you in Men Don't Leave, you were familiar. In Scent of a Woman, you were the likable student worker. In NCIS, you bear that easy style even in the face of international risk as well. I'm told by the advancement personnel here at Boston College that you are known for being an approachable celebrity, taking photos with others, speaking to people who approach you regularly. Look, you're here this evening with us on a Zoom webinar without any band playing in the background, without anything really but our own rooms. Here we are. Your manner is ordinary, but in that way you become for others a bit of an everyman, as the medievalists called him. Today we would say you are approachable, even vulnerable in the sense of being responsive to others. A vulnerability that's not just responsive, but capacious. The vulnerability that emerged in Men Don't Leave and was evident in Scent of a Woman. But in Men Don't Leave, you learned to develop that vulnerability. It was not with you as the movie began and as we saw it. It was something you started to develop. So I wanted to ask you about this way of being open to others, responsive to others, interested in others, a certain familiarity and ordinariness, as Lafarge would call it, that I think captures a good bit of the way you present yourself. And it seems to me that it may have something to deal with some things that you acquired in your life that you could share with us. Ways that you grew up with Catholic education, ways that you grew up in your family, values that were taught to make you appreciate what it means to be responsive, what makes you able to be available, to be approachable, to not go another route. So could you share with us, this claim that I'm making about your own way of being and
Sure.
a style?
I'm going to go on record and say that might be the single longest question I've ever been asked.
Yeah, well, we wanted to really clear to say that you're ordinary is.
I will take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
absolutely.
a big one.
It's funny. I think that, more than anything, it just goes back from being raised in the Midwest. I think it's just part of my upbringing. My dad was a real simple guy and never took himself too seriously. And I think it was just kind of the way we were raised. It's interesting you say that as far as the way that character changed in Men Don't Leave. And I'll get back to that in a second. But I think more than anything, when I started out in this business, I started when I was 14 years old. I did my first film when I was 18. I was not a trained actor. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of winging it. And all I could think to do was put myself in the character's shoes and try and give as honest a performance as possible. And I think that probably resulted in me trying to just make it as close to who I am, or just like I said, put myself in the shoes of that person. And that I think that Midwest kind of mentality shined through. I think that, in general, as far as being responsive or sensitive to people, I do think I've always been that way. I do think I'm good at reading people quickly, getting a read on someone and what their intentions are. Maybe not from a whole, who is somebody, what is their agenda, that sort of thing. But as far as seeing an individual without even having a conversation and being able to pick up on what that person is dealing with. And I think that that's really important as an actor, because listening is such an important thing, and being able to react as a result of that listening. And as far as Men Don't Leave and the change, I think that part of that was when him not being so accessible and vulnerable until towards the end of the film was similar to myself. I started out and a lot of those scenes came very easy to me. And as the film went on, it got a little more emotional with the loss of his father and having to step up for his mom. And it was interesting because I think as a human being, we're always conditioned to try and hide our emotions and hold them back and not be seen as vulnerable. I'm always someone that's had my emotions pretty close to the surface. It's just kind of the way I've always been. And that process of going through that film and working with an amazing director, Paul Brickman, and Jessica Lange, was that they pulled that out of me. And that was the trick, was to be able to let your guard down, and let go of your defenses, and be vulnerable and be accessible. And that's what allowed me to do that. And honestly, that was really, that performance is the one that more than anything opened the doors for me. It wasn't, not many people saw it. It wasn't a huge commercial success, but certainly in my world and in out here in Los Angeles, that was the movie that really put me on the map as far as people realizing that there was something there, I guess you could say.
Yeah, there's a remarkable risk, you know, when you're inviting this man to stay more close to your mother. Mm-hmm. There's an enormous sense of, I know I screwed up, but I want to make sure that something happens here. And you conveyed a vulnerability that somebody at that age would find, you know, very challenging to capture.
Well, I think desperate times call for desperate measures. You know, I think it's moments like that where you hope people's, you know, true self comes out when someone's desperate, and it becomes like a primal thing. And the bravado you might have. I mean, you know, I am approachable for sure, but when I was, you know, a high school kid, I was not somebody that had that confidence to be, you know, going out and making friends with everybody in the world and approaching people. If anything, I was, you know, very insecure.
Yeah. And,
you know, once approached, I was great. But of course, like everybody at that age, you put up a false bravado. And I think that it is part of, you know, I think your upbringing. You know, for me, it's always been it's a Catholic upbringing, but it's the way my parents raised me. But once you get past kind of the false bravado or whatever it is, there's an honestness there. There's your core beliefs, you know, tend to shine through a little bit more.
Yeah. And today, you know, there's a lot of people talking about vulnerability. At times we talk about vulnerability as a person being wounded, but there's others, like a philosopher, Judith Butler, who talks about vulnerability as a capacity, as actually the ability to respond. It's not to be wounded, but to be able to hear and to recognize and to appreciate another's situation. And so I think that hopefully we'll see in our own country during these times when there is an experience of overall threat, that we become, if you will, more vulnerable, more open to the other, a little less afraid. So on that, I'm going to hand this over to Tiffany, because Tiff, you know, has a number of questions for you, especially about that point that you made about Jessica Lange and your director helping you to really touch down something that was within you, this vulnerability that needed to emerge. That can be a good segue for Tiff to enter in.
Okay.
Yes. So during our time at BC, I think Boston College does a really great job of emphasizing, you know, being that vulnerable and being able to be a person for and with others. And that's also part of the BC and Jesuit tradition as a whole. So as a BC graduate, how did your time at BC help you contribute to the common good by serving and standing with others? And how do you think you have found that you've been able to incorporate that into your acting career?
Well, it's interesting. I went to Catholic school my whole life, but a little parochial school on the North Shore of Chicago, you're not exposed to much. And then I went to Loyola Academy, which was at the time the largest all-boys Jesuit school in the country. And I think that part of that sensitivity and vulnerability is having an appreciation for what is out there in the world, and you know, getting you out of your little cocoon and understanding other people's challenges in life. And I think that that's one of the things that, as I went on and continued that same Jesuit tradition at BC, it's, you know, for us, it was men for others, and it's, you know, women and men for others at BC. Not only is it about the service element and going out and engaging, but the service element and understanding that and having that firsthand experience, it forces you to, you know, just have an appreciation for how blessed your life can be. And, you know, forget material success or that, but just healthy, happy life and a good family and that sort of thing. And you start to realize, you know, what is really important in that respect. And kind of the old adage that, to those a lot is given, a lot is expected. And I think that if you keep that in mind and have an appreciation for it, I think that, like I said, when the times get tough or when things really matter, you have kind of a, I don't know if it's a moral compass, but you've got something that's an inner light that's, pushing you in the right direction to try and make the right decisions. And obviously we're not all perfect in any manner in that respect, but it's a good, I think, framework for education. I think that's why it worked so well for me. As far as, how that translates into my career, I think like I said, it's that openness and vulnerability and sensitivity that helps you to be a good listener and to understand people and give you some perspective and to try and understand different roles. I think that would be kind of the best way I could translate that in as far as actual performances and that sort of thing.
Awesome. As someone who is both interested in performance and marketing as well, are there any skills that you have learned during your time at BC studying marketing that have been applicable to your performance career and vice versa?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's funny, I started at BC as a finance major. Although I was making films on the side, it didn't make a ton of sense. I switched to marketing because it just was a really natural fit for me. Mm-hmm. And the finance classes, if you missed a semester, it made it really tough because the courses built upon each other. But I come from a family where most of my siblings were in sales, whether it be advertising for, TV, radio. They were pretty creative too. Sometimes you have to create your own jingles and that sort of thing. So I was always kind of around that. And I just took to it like a fish to water. And it was at the time when we would do projects, if we had to go out into the community and interact with, different companies and try and pitch them ideas, it was just very comfortable for me. It has been helpful because I think part of being an actor since I was a young kid is you're trying to market your product, which is yourself. And you're constantly trying to sell yourself on why a casting director or a director should cast you in their next role. And that's a sales job, that's a marketing job. And I think that there are definitely lessons I learned from BC with that, but it's interesting. I mean, times change and I always knew the importance of getting my name out there and doing all the interviews to support every film I did. Nowadays with social media, I'm kind of torn on it sometimes because it is very important. It's the way that people communicate and advertise their shows these days. But at the same time, I look at Instagram every day like everybody else and like to see what my friends are up to. But I'm also conscious that a lot of this stuff, I don't want to be constantly posting fun things that I'm doing in outrageous places that I'm going, because I've got a lot of friends and people that are close to me that are having trouble paying their rent. And it's kind of, it just seems a little bit in bad taste. So typically when I'm posting now, it's something that I have to promote or it's a work thing. It probably doesn't make sense for me from a financial standpoint, because if you can build a really big following, you can use that, monetize that. But, I think there's a balance to it. And also there's a whole element of, you want a little bit of privacy in your life. And I don't need to have everything I do be broadcast to the world, because the difference is when I post something, it doesn't just go to my circle of friends, it goes all over these other websites.
Yeah.
And, this interview we're doing right now, I will see clips of this tomorrow on the internet. And, when I travel and I go places and I'll see someone at an airport, I'm always happy to take a picture. But a lot of times I'll say, how about a handshake or an autograph? Because as soon as you take a picture and you post it, then everybody knows where I am. Everyone knows what I'm doing. And I've lost my privacy at that point. So it's an interesting thing, trying to manage marketing yourself and understanding the importance of it, but also maintaining a certain level of privacy in your life.
Right.
So can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Tiff, I just wanted to ask you, what do you think when you're listening to Chris's reply to your questions? I'm just dying to know.
I'm enjoying every second of it. It's so awesome to get to be able to talk with somebody who is kind of on the same path that I am, and maybe didn't start out or like major in theater or acting during college, but still found a way to pursue that, because it is something that I love to do, but I don't necessarily know if it was something that I would like to major in or anything like that. So being able to find ways to stay engaged with it outside of college is definitely something that's interesting to me, and being able to work in that marketing too, of learning about marketing, but also how do you market yourself as an actor, as a performer. So this is definitely really great for me.
Great. So I'd like to move to your longtime association with REDF. And for the audience, let me say that the Roberts Enterprise Development Fund, a non-for-profit, launched in 1997 to expand job development programs for people striving to overcome serious employment barriers. That is, those who have been imprisoned, those who suffer from mental health challenges, including from drug addiction, and those who are homeless. Could you tell us about REDF and about how and why you became involved with them? And
Sure,
about its impact on the lives of others?
I would be happy to. We actually refer to it as REDF, and it's named after my friend George Roberts, who started it. I was brought into it from George, who's just a friend I've gotten to know through the golf world. And he asked me if I was interested in being involved. And I said, well, tell me more about what you do. And when I heard about the program, it reminded me when I was a kid, my dad used to be on the board of an organization in Chicago called the Safer Foundation. And the Safer Foundation was trying to rehabilitate, people that were formerly incarcerated and, ex-cons. And I remember being a little kid and kind of hearing about it and really not understanding it completely, and asking my dad why, those are bad people. Why would we want to do that? And, he explained to me the value in it. And obviously everyone deserves a second chance and the importance of getting people back on track and, being good contributors to society. So that made it even more appealing to me. So REDF is basically, it's trying to promote and fund and help out these social enterprises. And the social enterprises are small organizations all around the country that are kind of an entry point for people that have the greatest barriers to getting back on track and getting a job. The whole idea being that, one of the most important things in life for having self-worth and a sense of, confidence is to have a job. Yeah. and to feel like you're a contributing member of society. It's a really important thing. Yeah. And so many of these people that were formerly incarcerated or have had substance abuse issues or mental health issues, they have the greatest barriers. That on-ramp to getting a job is brutal for them. So REDF supports these different groups that create businesses that are for-profit businesses that the main focus is employing these types of people and coming up with, industries where they are easier to hire. This is a first job for them. They not only offer this first job, but this a lot of support around it as far as teaching them how to present themselves for job interviews in the future, to manage their lives and that sort of thing, so that they can build towards getting that next job and getting back on track and, getting off the welfare system. And frankly, it's about the private sector trying to do this work as opposed to just depending on the government for doing it. And so today, it's real rewarding in that respect.
And today, how is REDF doing with regard to, say, COVID-19?
And this is a time where you can imagine that so many of these people are really in tough shape, not only because, they're more susceptible to getting it, a lot of homeless people, but there's, a lot of industry has been shut down. So the groups that are having success with them, we are making sure that we're getting them money, and also not just money so they can keep their businesses going, but we're trying to help them navigate all the waters as far as getting all the government aid that they're entitled to, because that can be a pretty complicated process as well. So it's been very rewarding to be a part of it. It's a terrific organization. They're creating a ton of jobs all over the country. And, when you live out here in a place like Los Angeles, or you travel up to San Francisco, the amount of homelessness on the streets here, it's chronic. It's a real problem. And, if you can get these people a job and not just, that's the thing that can really get them back on their feet. So that's what they're trying to do.
later in this series, we have 2 evenings on prisons. One is a newly launched program at Boston College on prison education reform program. And the director of it, Isabel Lane, here at BC, is going to come on and be interviewed by Crystal Tialis. And then we are also hoping to have a woman named Sister Maureen Clark, who works at Framingham MCI. This is the women's medium security prison nearby. And there's probably about 40 or 50 members of the BC community, who, myself included, who work there. And she has had an inspiring role of trying to build this bridge between BC and other prisons. And there'll also be a fellow coming from Denver who's a graduate of BC, a physician, who has started a clinic in Denver to help prisoners learn, if you will, that they can find a health clinic that's available for them and that they don't have to worry about bias that they may encounter in other places. So it's really terrific to hear you talk.
And it's nothing more frustrating than, you think of someone that just doesn't want to work and they'd rather sit around and collect checks from the government. And then there's people that are dying to work and just looking for an opportunity. Yeah. And they can't get past the stigma that someone has that, oh, they serve time, or they have mental health issues, or, they have a drug addiction or a history of that. And so, there's so many people that are desperate to get jobs. They just need help kind of getting past that first step.
Yeah. My dad was head of Manhattan South Homicide Squad. He was Kojak. I was son of Kojak. Nice. And he did he taught me a great deal about appreciating people, not for what they seemed to be, but who they were really. He would talk about people on the street that he knew, some who would be routinely arrested, some who were sex workers, a variety of people, and talked about their honesty. It would also help me to appreciate that they were coming from a very different background, but that they could be more honest than other people. So he helped me to appreciate, if you will, especially people from prison, especially people who had a criminal record, to say that gives you part of the story, but that you really need to meet the person before you have the whole story. And right. I think giving, Red F sounds like it's an ideal program for allowing that whole story to come out.
Yeah, and they've gathered so much information and have a lot of great expertise and really smart people running it. And they've seen what has worked at all the different social enterprises around the country. And so they're trying to share that information as much as possible and kind of create a model that is a successful model where you can start these different businesses. And then they have events a couple times a year where they try and bring people in and, come up with different ideas and brainstorm as far as what else could possibly work and where there's needs, because you want these things to be successful. You want them to generate cash so that they continue to be a thriving business.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Can people find REDF online?
Yes, absolutely.
And just put down REDF.
Yep.
That's the way I found it. Good, thank you. Tiff?
Yeah. So something that I love about BC is the whole idea of cura personalis, right? The care and knowledge of the whole person. And I think it allows people like myself and you, Chris, who are maybe interested in different things, to do that while at school. So I love that I have the ability to act, but also have the ability to, learn about marketing and learn about psychology, which are also things that I love. And I think in that idea of cura personalis, BC really challenges us to form our whole person so that we are prepared for any challenges or anything the world could possibly throw at us, so we can kind of pull from our toolbox of everything that we know about. And so a lot of people know that a career in performance often comes with a lot of challenges and rejections. And I was just wondering, what have been some of the most pivotal moments in your career and some of those challenges that you may have faced, and what advice would you give to other aspiring performers to overcome them?
Well, I think you're right. I think that that's probably part of why I continued to go to BC in the business school, was because I knew the chances of me actually being a successful actor were so slim. I mean, I was a pretty buttoned up little kid at an early age, and I knew whatever I did, I was going to be successful at something. And I loved the idea of performing and being on TV or in the movies or whatever that was, but it just seemed so far-fetched. But it was my dream, and I kind of took baby steps at first. I mean, I wasn't afraid. I mean, I was 14 years old, and as kind of the expression, chance favors the prepared mind. I was literally got off the Yellow Pages and started calling all the talent agencies in Chicago. I'm the youngest of 7 kids. And I was like, this is how I'm going to make my mark, I guess. I'm going to be on TV. And they would answer the phone. I'd say, hey, my name's Chris O'Donnell. I'd like to come down and be on TV. And he'd say, who is this? I'm like, it's Chris O'Donnell. And they'd say, okay, we'll call you. And of course, they never did. But as luck would have it, my sister met someone at a wedding that had a small agency. And she said, oh, send your brother down. And so it was like, because I kind of put it out there, suddenly I had a foot in the door. And I took advantage of that opportunity. I started to get a lot of jobs. But even as I went through and had some success, I did some commercials. I did one episode of a TV show in high school. And then I got this film, this Men Don't Leave, which was a huge deal. And even when I got it, I remember they called me. They were so excited to tell me that I'd gotten the part. And I said, okay, I'll have to get back to you. And they were so confused because up to this point, I had skipped a couple of the auditions because I was like, they're not really going to hire me. They're not taking me seriously. And this is too good to be true. I didn't really believe it could happen. And frankly, I was so excited that this was my chance to go to college. I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. But I got it, and I did miss my first semester, and I had a great experience doing the film. But I think I was afraid to give up that education and the possibility of a good education and a steady, normal life to kind of go for my dreams. Because I just thought, there's just no way. I know I've come this far, but there's no chance. And I also honestly wanted to have the college experience at the age of 18 and 19 and not just come back as an adult and get that experience.
Yeah.
When Scent of a Woman came along, that was a huge deal because I knew when I read that script, it was the role of a lifetime. I knew every actor in the world wanted that part. And I said, if I was able to get that part, that would not be a fluke. Because I didn't have total confidence that I knew what the hell I was doing. You know, I'm thinking maybe I'm just getting lucky here. Maybe I'm just, I just fit the part right. And I did a good job. But Scent of a Woman, I said, if I can win that part, that would mean something. And so I said, I'm going to put all my energy into that and work as hard as I ever have on a series of these auditions. And I did. And when I got that part, that really gave me a lot of confidence to think, okay, this is going to be my priority. I still finished BC and I still got my education because that was a promise I had made to my father that I would, obviously get my education. But that was a really big turning point. The first Batman film I did, Batman Forever, was a huge turning point because the international, it was the biggest opening of all time when it came out. And that just exploded my career. And that kind of launched me into a different part of my career where I realized how green I was. There was just so much success came so quickly. And I didn't really know what I was capable of. I didn't know. I think sometimes I got too precious with choices I made. I'd had success upon success upon success. And I was afraid to kind of, I should have just kept working and done what seemed right, what felt right. But you kept thinking, well, everything's got to be perfect and it's got to be another big hit. And it puts a lot of pressure on you. And I think I also at the same time was afraid of some things. I think that I didn't know what I was actually capable of as an actor. And I think that sometimes good roles would come along and I would make up an excuse why I didn't want to, take the part. And I think deep down inside, I knew, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I had it in me. And I went on a run there, had a lot of success, but I got burnt out. I took a break. And when I came back, someone had moved my cheese, so to speak. And suddenly I was not in the same position I had been in my career. And I really had to kind of rebuild my reputation and earn my stripes again. And that's when I went on and did the Arthur Miller play on Broadway, The Man Who Had All the Luck. And that was another big turning point, even though, again, a Broadway play, it was a limited run. We did 80 shows. So not many people saw this thing. But for me, it was the greatest confidence builder I ever had because I discovered what I was capable of. I realized that, Scott Ellis, who was the director, was so helpful. I remember he gave me a copy of Uta Hagen's book. He's like, read this, and I'm reading it. I'm going, oh, that's what that's called? I've been doing that. And, oh yeah, I do that. And I realized I'm thinking, I didn't go to acting school, but I've been working with Al Pacino and Jessica Lange and Marty Brest and all these great directors for the past 15 years. I know what I'm doing. I just didn't, it was kind of like a belief in yourself that you needed to have. So that gave me a lot of belief. And then by the time NCIS Los Angeles has come along, we're just about to start our 12th season coming up. I think that because I'd been around the block, I had my ups and downs, as opposed to just being shot out of a cannon. There was a real appreciation that this was a great opportunity. This was a show that was going to be filmed in Los Angeles at a time when I have 5 kids in school full time, and that I was going to work as hard as I could to make it work. It's still a crapshoot. You don't know if people are going to tune in, to watch your show. But thankfully it did. And LL Cool J, Todd, as I call him, was kind of in a similar boat. He'd been around as long as I had and had ups and downs. And we both looked at each other and said, let's go for this and work as hard as we can, have no regrets if it doesn't work out. And as a result, we've had a great long run on this show, and it's been a real blessing. But I'm you give a real appreciation, and you're very grateful for it because of the journey you've been through. You know what I mean? Sometimes as things are happening, it goes by so fast, or things are coming so fast, you can't kind of stand back and see what's happening and have some perspective. And thankfully it didn't. Through that journey, I didn't get destroyed by the ups or downs, because I always had. And I think this is where, it's important to have a family around you, or just people close to you that can, knock you down a notch when you need it. But I remember, just being told, don't get too excited about the highs, because when the lows come, if you believe the great reviews, you're gonna have to believe the horrible reviews. And so it's been a really interesting journey in that respect. But those are kind of the key, movies and moments as far as the career goes.
If I could jump in on that, and you've been so autobiographical here on your own experience, and now it's to maybe use that to give advice. And I'm thinking, as I've sent to you this question, in A Scent of a Woman, when Charlie Sims, played by you, first meets Frank Slade, played by Al Pacino, the scene is a pretty rude awakening. The audience is really not prepared for the likes of Frank Slade, nor was Charlie Sims. And in that encounter, you walk into this room and Slade shouts at you, "What do you want?" And before you can answer, he says again, "What do you want?" And you reply simply, "I want a job."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
in the midst of COVID-19, like the Reddit people that you're talking about, when you reflect on the challenging times that we are facing today, and in particular, our seniors who just finished yesterday, they would have had commencement.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any words of wisdom to share with students now?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people looking for jobs, and hopefully things will get back to normal soon, and the market will open back up for people to be able to find them. But I would say a couple of things. I mean, it's interesting during this whole past 9-10 weeks of this COVID experience. I've discovered that we were talking about this yesterday. I almost call it like the elimination of FOMO. Everything's been canceled. There's nothing else going on, right. And I've really been able to enjoy everything in the moment and what I'm doing. It may not be what I had planned on doing at the time, but you can appreciate things and have time to do things that you kind of were rushing through life so fast that you didn't get to appreciate. And I've taken up some different interests and tried some different things. And it's been a really interesting time. And we've had amazing family time as well with all the kids. But, maybe that is the silver lining in all of this. And that these past couple months, maybe some people have been forced to, reevaluate what they really want to do. And maybe suddenly there's been something that has piqued their interest in the past couple months that might lead them down a different road, and decide that I thought I wanted to do this, but maybe that's not what I was meant to do. So we'll see. I mean, that's what's interesting about life and the journey that you go on, is that at the time you think it's got to happen this way, it's got to be structured. And I think that if you're willing to, like I said, don't be afraid of failure. If you're willing to, almost go towards what scares you, because that's where you're going to have the greatest sense of accomplishment. And if you're willing to do that, and you're willing to put in the time and work hard, I think that people will find opportunity. And I think you just have to be persistent.
Tiffany, you want to ask one last question, and then we'll go to the questions from the audience?
Yeah, definitely. So I think my last question is kind of in a similar vein. When coming to BC and just college in general, I didn't really realize that I kind of just thought that my path would be linear, that I would just kind of know what I'm doing. So I did come in actually as pre-med, and then I decided that that was in fact not for me. But I think part of that was because of so many opportunities that BC has, whether that's extracurriculars or like the Endeavor Retreat, which is a career exploration retreat. And so with there being so many things to do at BC and so many opportunities, was there anything you wish you did at BC? Or do you have any advice for current students that are at BC? And is there anything you wish you knew when you were graduating?
Well, Tiff, you're certainly taking advantage of BC from everything I hear
Yeah.
that you're doing. So well done in that respect, I will tell you.
Thank you.
If you talk to my son and my daughter at BC and get them to crack the whip on them a little bit. But I think that it's interesting. When I was in high school, I was hyper involved. I mean, I did everything at Loyola Academy. It sounded a lot like Tiff's resume at BC. That was who I was, and I loved it, and I just had a blast. By the time I got to BC, I was spending so much time juggling, going back and forth between doing films while I was at school. And at the beginning, I wasn't telling anybody. I mean, freshman year, I missed the first semester because I was doing a film. And when I got there in January, I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. And there was many weekends where I had to sneak away to California for one night. And people were like, where were you last night? And I was just like, oh, I had to, run out of town. And I didn't want to be known as the kid that was doing films. So I missed out on some stuff. I missed all of senior year, the entire senior year, well, except for senior week, which I came back for because I did a couple films. And I do wish that I had taken better advantage of everything that BC offers. I would tell people that, when you're making your schedule at BC, don't just base it on what is the easiest schedule and what's the easiest class you've heard of, especially when you get outside your core classes. Really, seek out the electives that are things that genuinely interest you, because it won't seem like work. And try and get the best professors. Find out who the best professors are and build relationships. I've had a couple that I've stayed in touch with over the years, and those are people that made a big difference. And that's what you're paying for to go to school like BC. Besides interacting with an amazing group of people and classmates from all over the world, there's amazing teachers, and you want to, take advantage of that. And believe me, I had, focused a lot on having fun at BC, but I had some great teachers along the way. And I think that that's an important part. And like I say, I think I wish I would have been involved a little bit more in some of the other offerings they had, but I was just in a unique situation where my time was cut up by something else.
Right.
I love you talking about Loyola Academy. I did my Regency at Canisius High School in Buffalo. So it's great to hear how Jesuit high school education really helps form people. I see it here, but I remember how much I was involved in.
And we're still so close. I mean, and again, another result of this this pandemic has been these Friday night Zoom calls with my high school knucklehead buddies.
Yeah.
I mean, guys I haven't seen in forever. And the group keeps growing and bringing other people in. And I mean, you feel like you're back sophomore year sitting at the cafeteria table. I mean, it's crazy. And we go right back to the same little fights we used to have and giving each other a hard time about the most meaningless things. And, it was a great 4 years.
It's amazing how many people are reconnecting with people that they've lost.
Yeah.
I think that this season, if you will, has afforded at least that.
Yeah.
So here's a question from Amy Demacia from the class of 2000 and then 2006. And she asks, as a community of men and women for others, how can we encourage those around us who have not had the same exposure to that idea? To act like we are all in this together, this being COVID-19, for instance, and the world at large, regardless of our respective differences. So there's a certain way that here we are, all part of the BC community, talking about something very familiar to us, like the common good. But how do we communicate that beyond our kin, beyond our community?
Well, it's tough beyond our community because not everybody has a platform to, reach beyond their community. I think that, everything's gotten so political. If you say anything that's, begins to sound preachy in any direction, people it sounds like noise and people tend to turn off to it. I mean, the way I was always raised was kind of teaching by example. And I think that, if people kind of make a point of taking it upon themselves to try and lead by example, try and make the right choices, and, let your actions speak for yourself. That's the easiest thing you can do, but it's tough. That's part of it. Every time we've had a real crisis in the world or in this country, it's brought us together. And it seems like, it's never felt more divided in this country than it is right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have this question from Patricia Riggin, who is the Associate Professor of the Practice of Theater here at BC. And she would like to know, how do you view the role of the arts, especially theater and film, as vehicles for social awareness and change?
Well, I think it's amazing. I mean, so many things that were kind of taboo topics, the ice gets broken through the arts, whether it be a play, a TV show, a film, any topic. If you talk about, Ellen DeGeneres having a lesbian relationship on a sitcom, or, just any sort of thing that is not anything. It's an amazing platform to kind of open people's eyes and to help people be not so predisposed to what their thinkings are. And so it's important in that respect.
Yeah. And then another question is from Douglas Baker, who is a student in the class of 2022. He would like to know if you could attribute your motivation for supporting a cause like REDIF to your time at Boston College.
Absolutely. I think that it's interesting. The whole, Men for Others, Women and Men for Others, especially where I grew up in the Midwest, you do things because it's the right thing to do, and it's for your own personal reasons, and you don't do it to get attention. You're not doing it to, toot your own horn. And I remember being a kid, and somebody would die, and you go to the funeral, and instead of there being one or two priests on the altar, there was 15 priests on the altar, and you're thinking, what is going on here? And they start to talk about, what this person did, and you're like, wow, somebody that you had no idea that behind the scenes was, really contributing and making a difference in people's lives. And I think that's the way I would prefer to do things. But the situation that I'm in, there's a lot of organizations where I can give a lot more help by lending my name and being involved on that level. And you're kind of torn on the one respect, because again, you're not doing it to get attention. You're not doing it to show people that you're special or something. But if your name recognition or celebrity, whatever you want to call it, helps draw attention to this cause that you think is important, then that's worth doing. But I think that generally speaking, the way I was taught, it was about doing the right things for the right reason and for your own reasons.
So here's a question from a familiar name, Sarah Page. And she asked, and this is something that you were referring to, at least indirectly, several times earlier, but she asked if you could share with us if there was a time in your life when you felt that you had actually failed, and what coping mechanisms you used to deal with that failure.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times where you feel like you've let someone down. Coping mechanisms, I think that it's always good to talk about things with people and be as honest as possible. Frankly, your religion is a pretty good place to begin if you feel like you've really screwed up on something and you need to have some direction and some guidance. I mean, I don't care what someone's religion is, but just as long as you have a framework to help you kind of think things through and to give yourself some perspective and be able to forgive yourself and move on from things. But yeah, I absolutely have had plenty of failures in life.
Yeah, I'm really touched by that. I think it's hard for us to talk about failure in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, we don't want to name it. We prefer to get around it. and believe it reveals too much. And yet, like you said earlier, about taking the risk, to take that job that really seems the hardest or the one that's out there furthest. Similarly, I think it's out of failure that most people learn their most important lessons.
Well, yeah, and a lot of, there's a difference between the failure of, oh, I went up for this movie and I didn't get the part, or we lost the game. That's and then there's the failure of you did something that you're not a good human being for doing that, or you really hurt someone when you did that. That's a different type of failure. And those are the ones that are where you really have to do some self-examination and kind of, try to understand, why did you think you did that? What was the cause of that? And to be able to kind of man up and own it and not be afraid to ask for forgiveness and that sort of thing.
Yeah. We got another question from the audience, and this time it is from Tim Crawford, who is a professor in the political science department. And he would like to know if you have any advice for students from your experience in your career or your time at BC on how to build connections with professors.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because some of the times I built relationships was that I can just tend to be maybe not outspoken, but just out of sheer boredom, I tend to have to try to poke fun at things or try to find humor in things. So that would always be either a good thing or a bad thing in a lecture class, or, some teachers would respond in a good way, some in not so good a way. But honestly, I was forced to get close to some of my teachers because I had to figure out ways to get the school to work with me to help accommodate my schedule. And like Jim Bowditch, who was there, Dean Bowditch for a long time, was really helpful as far as, because I was at a point where I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish college. I just don't know that it's going to work. And I'm kind of on this track. And he's like, no, he goes, we can make this work. He goes, we have all these athletes here. We've got Olympic skiers. We work with these people. We make accommodations. He goes, this is a unique situation. It's great for the school. Let's figure out a way to make this work. And so, had I never gone and just told him what was going on and spoken up, I might not have finished.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you for what you've been saying. This is our very first evening doing this series. We developed this series about 6 weeks ago as an idea. We were at a meeting, a seminar of senior administrators at BC, and Amy Yancey, the new vice president for development, talked about her daughter and about how being online and taking classes online gave her some order for her day. And she wondered what would happen after the classes online came to an end and what type of accompaniment we would do. And so we were all at this meeting and we came up with the idea that we should do a show online and offer it twice a week. And we've ended up developing 26 different segments. But we wanted to start it with somebody who could help us to find our core, find our center, somebody who could help us to talk in variegated ways as a spouse, as a parent, as an alum, as a celebrity, as a person who's had a variety of different experiences on stage and film. And you've really brought that to us in a deep way, in a revealing way. And for me, it's delightful because we've been working on this now for 6 weeks, and we've been doing it nonstop. The people who are in the background doing this, and we're really looking forward to the weeks ahead. And we tend to do it now for 13 weeks. We want to be a bridge for the entire BC community as we go through COVID-19, as we attempt to move beyond lockdown and attempt to work for others, especially like with people needing REDF and other sources of support to re-enter a world that's fairly, as you said, fragmented. So I just want to really thank you for this. the way you've shared yourself. And as I said, you know, in the beginning, not only are you approachable, but you actually show up. And it's, you know, as one other has told us, that's what most of life is about. So I want to thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. It's you know, it's been fun to stay connected to BC all these years. I'm enjoying it so much, having two of my kids there right now, and just every excuse to come back to campus and see my old buddies. And it's funny. I always felt like I kind of got shortchanged on my time there, and so I'm kind of making up for it now as an adult. But it's a great place and big part of my life. So happy to help out.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining.
Tiff, best of luck to you with your rest of your school and your future career with whatever you choose.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure, and it has been wonderful talking to you. Also, thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us tonight. And of course, thank you to Father Jim Keenan, who had me on the show and had Chris on the show and has been working so hard to get this ball rolling with BC and the Common Good. And if you enjoyed this one, we would love to invite you to attend our next segment, which would be the Voices of 2020, which is a student panel, which will feature representatives from the class of 2020. And those will be Victoria Ang, Caitlin Ferrari, Ignacio Fletcher, Joseph Nano, and Michael Sagai. And this panel will be hosted by Joy Moore, who is currently the Vice President for Student Affairs. And this will be on May 22nd at 6 p.m. and it will go until 7 p.m. And lastly, you do need to register for each segment you want to attend. And as you know, registration is very brief, but each segment will have its own webinar link. So be sure to check out our webpage at bc.edu/show@6, and you can see the next segments. And that's it from us. We hope you are staying healthy, staying well, and good night from Boston College.